to this webinar on striking women on the picket line. This has been organised by the Women's Committee of the London Communist Party, so I welcome you on its behalf. My name's Mary Davis, I'm Secretary of the Women's Committee, and this is the first in our series of public meetings on the theme of trickle-down oppression, race, class and sex in austerity capitalism. So this first meeting, Striking Women, Women on the Picket Line, we hope to obviously hear from our wonderful panel here on their own issues and struggles, but in particular to look at it from the point of view of, for women, the conflicting demands of activism, domestic labour and all the things that women have to do in addition to being active in their own unions, and to look at how women fight on, because they do. And we've got women here who really show that that is the case. Why have we chosen this subject? Why women? Well, obviously we're a women's committee, so we might, as you might imagine, want to concentrate on that. But we feel that that as I think is fairly well known, women have always been hidden from history. That's certainly true in our own movement, in the labour movement, because the history is generally written about the leaders. And of course, until recently, very few women have been involved in leadership positions within the labour movement. That is changing. But we feel strongly that women should not be hidden right now. They might have been hidden in the past, but precisely because we have broken through in lots of respects, there is absolutely no reason why women should be hidden from this struggle. Because women are now half the labour force in this country, well over half actually, and over half of trade union members are women. And as this meeting will show, women, the other half of the working class and the labour movement, fight on. And this meeting, we will hear what I think are the rarely heard voices of women in the front line of what is now a class struggle against austerity capitalism. Without women, class unity is a daydream. It won't happen. You cannot ignore half of the workforce, half of the labour movement, half of the trade union movement. So women, with us, when victory is possible. Without us, it's impossible, absolutely impossible. This is not a white male movement anymore. This is a movement of women and of Black people, people of colour. So women are striking in both senses of the words. It's striking because women are playing a big role in this movement. And of course, women are on strike as well. So these are striking women that we've got here. And these three women, I'll make you might have thought there was going to be four, but there's three actually. These striking women will tell us exactly what they're doing. All of the women are involved in strike action in this period of what I think we'll all agree is heightened class struggle against austerity capitalism. Now, before I introduce the speakers, just some housekeeping. I think virtual reality keeping rules. This is a webinar, so we very much welcome questions and comments, but you will need to put them in the chat. Please do so. And unfortunately, we can't see you, but we will be able to take your questions and any comments that you want to make. That will be absolutely fine. Now, the three speakers, I'll introduce them in turn as they're going to speak. The fourth speaker, we had billed Antoinetta Ricci, who is the leading shop steward for our outsourced cleaners and has actually led a very successful strike in London's Royal Parks. She's ill, unfortunately, and she sends her apologies. So each of our three speakers, minus Antoinetta, will speak for up to 15 minutes. Then we'll take your questions if there are any. or any comments that you want to make, and then our three panelists will deal with those and in whatever way they see fit. And we'll probably ask each other questions as well. We hope they do, because they're all involved in different areas of the struggle. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, who is Sarah Green. Sarah is a secondary school teacher, an active member of the National Education Union. She's a union rep. She's also a member of the Young Communist League. And as you know, the NEU have voted, or are in the process of voting, you'll update us about this, Sarah, for to take strike action. We are in an unprecedented moment where well over, I think it's probably getting on for 1.5 million workers have been balloted and will be taking industrial action. This is quite an exceptional moment. So, Sarah, please, I invite you to speak and really look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. I'm very glad to be here. So, yeah, our indicative ballot turned out to be an 86% yes vote, which is fantastic. We are now going for industrial action, and that will be underway until the 13th of January. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about the current dispute, a bit more context on that, and then I'm going to speak a bit more about how women are involved in that. I'm sure a lot of us are aware that teaching is overwhelmingly a female profession. So, and I've just got some notes on the side, so if I'm looking to the right a little bit too much, I apologise. So oftentimes educators are told that industrial action is a disruption to our pupils' learning, as if every teacher just does it for the secure income, pension and holidays. And as attractive as they all are, it is no reason that the promise of stability through to retirement should be seen as a luxury, nor should we be penalised for wanting it when big businesses are making record profits, cutting tax on capital gains whilst inflation rates soar alongside further austerity measures. Now, we've seen incredible victories from some of the strongest unions, such as the RMT and the CWU, who led a record-breaking 77% ballot and were taking action for the first time since 1986. Educators are now taking a stand against the impending threat to our working rights and conditions, as well as the livelihoods of our pupils, because these cuts will further decrease vital resources that are already scarce. Our pupils will miss out on receiving the education that they deserve in a safe environment that has the resources and staff to accommodate for all pupils' needs. We already see the physical and psychological ramifications of deprivation and extreme poverty with a lot of our pupils. Educators know this readily more than a lot of people, as these children are in our care 7:30 till 4:30 or later 5 days per week. These cuts to schools are an extension of public service cuts, moreover, that our pupils in the borough that I work in, Greenwich, is one of the most deprived boroughs, and they are going to feel that more than most. Now, I'm only an ECT and I'm only in my second year of teaching, but I'm wondering how long someone in my position can withstand working a teacher's job without a teacher's wage. We're now looking at a generation of new teachers who chances are living in shared accommodation with little to nothing to offer in savings, with little to no chance of ever being able to afford the stability of an income. So it comes as no surprise whatsoever that we've now got a teacher retention crisis, with 1 in 5 leaving the profession years before they would have done 20, even 10 years ago. Now, there's not one teacher I know that doesn't go above and beyond for their pupils, and I'm always humbled and amazed by the amount of knowledge, skills and diligence I always see and learn from. And I'm wondering where these experienced teachers who inspire me are going to be should this government continue to cut our pay and neglect our working conditions. Now, we hear a lot about losing pay during industrial action, and I'm sympathetic towards my members on that, but we're already looking at a 7% cut across the board. So I asked my members to leverage what you'd look at losing wage on strike compared to what is going to be a precedent for the foreseeable, given that 2006 was the last time that teaching wages went above inflation rates. We also always hear about how we're doing it for the kids, how their learning will be disrupted. And I always have to ask myself, learning for what stable jobs, what secure future? Because at the moment, I can't think of one industry that is not under attack from this government in one way or another. I can't think of one university that won't straddle 24k per year of debt on our sixth form students, the teachers in which are currently carrying out their own individual dispute in full force. So we need to do away with this dichotomy of our working rights and their working rights, because our working rights are their working rights, and we do them a disservice if we don't fight for them. Now, statistically speaking, the teaching workforce is overwhelmingly represented by women. This takes its historical roots in women being assigned proclivities to look after children. However, I'm not going to draw on arguments about women in leadership because, to quote Audre Lorde, the master's schools will never destroy the master's house. See, first and foremost, I stand shoulder to shoulder with the female support staff, the LSAs, and by extension, the nurses, women in the RMT, CWU members, and indeed any woman fighting a labour dispute against what is, as we know, an increasingly iron fist. I also stand with the girls in school who are facing cuts in my borough of around £350,000 per pupil over the next academic years, in a country where 1 in 5 schools are using food banks in conjunction with further public welfare cuts, moreover. I also stand shoulder to shoulder with trans girls facing potentially life-threatening policy changes to their recognition, which could reverse the work of advocates such as Jaguar in schools who have fought to ensure that they're protected and are not eradicated from the 2010 Equalities Act. I also stand with Black female teachers who overwhelmingly agree that the appraisal process is punitive for them rather than progressive, and who experience discrimination directly and indirectly in schools every single day. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from my fellow striking women.
Thank you very much. That was very striking. It's lovely. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Bella Fashola. Bella is the very active member of RMT, and as you know, RMT really have been at the forefront of this current wave of strike action. Bella is the lead rep at Churchill's cleaning group, and I know she's got a lot to tell us. So Bella, over to you.
Thank you. And Sarah, that was brilliant. Really interesting bits to hear in there. Mary's already given my introduction. My name's Bella. I work for an outsourced cleaning firm on the rail sector. As many of you are aware, privatisation is a rat race to the bottom. So I'm 26 years old. I went in as a rail cleaner, thinking that it would be easier to get a job on the railway by applying from a cleaner internally to a job as an OBS guard or whatever job's available. That is simply not the case anymore. It doesn't work like that. Through privatisation, it's so hard to get into the actual railway. Through privatisation, you end up stuck in a job that should be desirable. There's nothing wrong with cleaning, don't get me wrong, but the companies you're forced to work for beat you down on a daily basis. Female workers struggle. They struggle with uniform because the outsourced cleaning company wants to provide you with the cheapest possible uniform. Therefore, if you're a smaller shoe size, say a size 3, and you're a female, you can forget about getting those twice a year because they're going to say, oh, we can't order it. This is not what the places where we get our stock from can supply. That's just one thing. There's also crucial point in our demands of premature baby policy. At current, as an outsourced cleaner for the company that I work for, you will not be paid. If you give a maternity date to go off to have your baby and you have your baby early, you will not be paid until it reaches the date that you first gave to go off on maternity leave. If you want to change that date, you've got to give 6 weeks notice. It's absolutely barbaric. It's disgusting. So that's one of our demands. Many of you be aware, we're also on the lowest possible conditions. That's no sick pay, no travel facilities, and the real living wage, as they call it at the moment. So we are currently on £9.90 outside of London, £11.05 in London, and we all know that's not wages that you can live on. We should not have to be working 6 days a week to struggle to get basic needs such as food, pay our energy bills that are rising through the roof. We shouldn't have to call going on holiday with our children or our families a luxury. It shouldn't be a luxury. This is something you should be able to afford as a working male or female yearly, at least twice to go on. But we're being fed these lies from the top down that we need to pay for everything. The working class needs to pay for every single mistake our government has made. And they will keep spilling out these lies on a daily basis because they can see the fight back. As you've heard from Sarah, we're all ready to fight. We're currently rebelling for all the Churchill cleaners that went out previously, and we're bringing out 7 more contracts on our national cleaners dispute. Another struggle as a female working class worker for an outsourced company is you don't even really want to think about starting a family because you can't even afford it. Why would you want to bring a child into a world where you can't even afford to keep your head above water? And that's something that's really, really sad. You can't even afford to have a normal social life because you need to work every single waking hour just to keep your head almost above water, which is getting more and more worrying. We can't do it. So we've got a good panel of females on here today, and I've seen a lot at conferences and rallies that I've been to over the year. I'm sure we'll continue to see more. In a sense, our struggle is becoming our gain. More and more women are speaking up and getting in stronger positions in their unions, in their workplaces, and I hope to be a massive part of that moving forward. Thank you very much.
No, and I'm absolutely sure you will be a massive part of that movement going forward. And this is great to hear you. Thank you so much, Bella. Our third speaker is Helen O'Connor. Helen writes a lot for the Morning Star, so I think a lot of people here read the Morning Star, and you should all read the Morning Star, by the way. It's the only paper that covers these disputes at all, and in a sympathetic way, of course, in a sympathetic way. And Helen is a member of the GMB. She's an ex-nurse. She's a union organizer of the Southern region, sorry, not Southeast. Yep. And she's an NHS organizer, and she has got plenty of experience in many struggles, and I'm sure she'll tell us all about it, and she's a great speaker. It's lovely to have you, Helen, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you for inviting me to speak. I'll start off by saying GMB Union organises some of the lowest paid, most oppressed workers in this country, and we organise it right across the economy. In the NHS, where I'm an organiser, 77% of the workforce are women. We're talking about nurses, cleaners, administration staff, catering staff, etc. Many are from migrant backgrounds. I'm a migrant myself. I served 28 years on the front lines of the NHS as a nurse. So the NHS is held up by women, basically. And traditionally, the NHS as an employer has exploited the goodwill of nurses in particular. We were encouraged when I was a young woman in the NHS to see the job as a vocation and see ourselves a bit like martyrs to the cause almost. And many of us have believed at that time we had a duty almost to sacrifice our own well-being for our patients. And I know that nurses still do overtime for free. They skip breaks when it's busy. And nurses have traditionally been viewed as the handmaiden almost of the doctor. And we were trained to obey rather than challenge, even though nurses are professionals and highly skilled and highly trained, and we study and etc. in our own right. So nurses have put up with having their pay terms and conditions eroded over decades. We've now reached a stage where student nurses have gone from being paid to train. I was paid to train. They're now working for free on wards and amassing thousands of pounds of student debt. And nurses have lost up to 20% of the value of their pay over the last decade. They've been subjected to de-skilling, being moved from post to pillar, and they were forced to face a deadly pandemic in hospitals that were a petri dish for COVID-19 without the proper personal protective equipment. Up to 2,000 died in the line of duty. Additionally, on top of all that, if that wasn't enough, the NHS is also has a real common tendency from what I've seen to refuse flexible working to women with children. So the consequences of women failing to stand up for themselves and failing to get properly organised in the unions has had dire consequences really for the wages, terms and conditions of the female workers in the NHS. And so a generic culture of like low pay, poor working conditions has become endemic right across the NHS because of years of cuts and privatisation that's largely gone unchallenged. So the big lesson I think we need to learn out of all of this is that women in the NHS and probably everywhere need to get a lot more active in our trade unions. The NHS also has a terrible habit of outsourcing all of the ancillary staff like the cleaners, the porters, to private companies that treat the workers even worse than the NHS does. These outsourced workers are mostly migrant workers in the London area, and they're denied the most basic rights, even including access to pay slips, which is illegal, and the right to even be paid on time for hours worked. So even with a majority female workforce, one of the things I found is that the structures of the NHS trade unions tend to still be dominated by men. And unions, I think, need to do far more to support women and migrant workers to become involved in trade union activity, enable them to access union training, because it's still the case that the way even the union training is structured and delivered, it's far more suited to better paid white men. That's what I find. We all know that even in 2022, it's still the case that women are held back politically and industrially due to our reproductive role in society, and women still carry the bulk of the household tasks and caring responsibilities. So one of the key things I think we need to fight for is the provision of childcare facilities to engage women in our union and keep women active in our movement as a whole. And I think a key way for women to build credibility in trade unions is to develop skills as workplace organisers. And I know from my own experience that when women do find the time to commit to union activity, it still can be very hard. They can get sucked into activities that have nothing to do with organising workplaces. For example, being on committees, getting pulled into endless management meetings and running personal cases for members. And I've seen good women get bullied by male-dominated trade union branches. It's happened to me myself during my period in the trade union movement. And in my experience, though, when workers suffer an attack on their paid terms and conditions, it's often the women actually who will be at the forefront of the fight back. Because at the end of the day, we're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for our families, our kids. And that's how I became a union rep myself, because I had no choice to do it. Many years ago, the employer I worked for threatened to cut grading and pay. By the time I'd organised my colleagues into the union, alongside doing my full-time job, looking after my young son at the time, we had defeated an attack by one of the largest mental health trusts in the country. We'd protected our own conditions and the service we worked for as well. And this happened more than a decade ago in the NHS. The NHS is a largely conservative workforce, and management have devoted a lot of time to embedding partnership working and resisting proper trade union organising. So the NHS is an area where trade unions face unique challenges due to the moral questions that arise around the tensions between delivering care to vulnerable people and the struggle to protect and drive up workplace pay and conditions. However, in spite of the challenges, it was and is still possible to organise all types of workers in the NHS. And the way I think in which nurses and others have been failed during the pandemic has hardened attitudes, but it's also raised consciousness as well. And nurses in particular are finally starting to become more engaged in trade unions, and they're starting to question what those trade unions are doing to protect their collective interests. And the impressive results of the recent RCN ballot shows that nurses are finally angry and willing to fight back. And if and when the health unions do set strike dates, there's talk of them setting them before December, everybody must absolutely visit those picket lines and support those nurses, because without them, there'll be no NHS for any of us. It's as simple as that, really. So for the past number of years, though, the lowest paid workers, those outsourced workers that I was speaking about, have been very much at the vanguard of the NHS trade union struggles. Whatever company these workers work for, whether it's ISS, whether it's Mitie, whether it's G4S, they get exploited. I've found when I've organised these workers that many women have stepped up in these struggles. I find that the outsourced women actually are the best class fighters of all, the best organisers, and without these women, the campaigns would definitely fail. So through organising themselves into the GMB, building solidarity, electing their reps, outsourced workers in particular have managed to push back global multinational companies' attacks on them and win big improvements in their pay and conditions. In 2019, Mitie GMB members in St. George's Hospital won a strike mandate that stopped Mitie imposing a cut to hours across the board. And earlier this year, G4S workers in Croydon University Hospital won a 24% pay rise and a sick pay scheme by passing their strike mandate threshold. But I want to finish my contribution on this important point. Women are 50% of the population. And like Mary correctly said in her introduction, class struggle will fail if women are excluded or pushed out of the labour and the trade union movement. And we have to be clear, this has happened to good trade union women already, and attacks on trade union sisters must be vigorously opposed by the entire labour and trade union movement, in my opinion, because we cannot afford to lose a single one. I also want to make the point that class cuts across everything, and organizing workplaces is about finding ways to unite people, because divide and rule is the key tactic employers will always use to break solidarity and break trade unions in workplaces. And be in no doubt that employers will even use protected characteristics to divide people. And an example of that I can think of is when Black mighty bosses in St. George's Hospital tried to challenge my right to organize Black workers purely on the basis that I'm white. So when class struggle starts, people very quickly pick their side, and that will always be determined by class interests over any other personal characteristic. We heard the autumn budget statement made by the Tories today, and we can discuss further what that means for people. But one thing is certain, it will be women who will bear the brunt of the attacks on public services. The NHS, for example, is getting another real terms budgets cut. We need 4 billion a year to clear the COVID backlog. We're getting just over 3 billion over 2 years with the inflationary pressures on top. Domestic abuse services run by women for women have been decimated, putting our sisters and children at risk of significant harm and even death. And cuts in living standards will worsen. We have to be really clear about that. And these attacks are almost always accompanied by attacks on women's rights too. So we have to prepare ourselves, not just for a period of struggle, but for a period of intensified struggle. So solidarity.
Oh, brilliant, Helen, as always. Thank you so much. Now, there's the chat is disabled apparently, so questions have to be put in the Q&A. But I've got a feeling that, and can we just try a little experiment, that if you raise your hand, you might be able to, I might be able to unmute you and you can speak. So can somebody raise their hand and let me see if I can do that. Somebody has, but I can't see who it is.
It's Mary and then Lorraine.
Oh,
and then
right,
Christina.
okay.
And Christina, I can see them.
All right, well, Mary.
Go on to the attendant.
Okay, wait, well, I'll get to it. And then I can allow you to talk. That would be even better, wouldn't it? We can have an actual conversation. But I can't. Mary, is it Mary Adesides?
Yeah.
Oh, right, Mary, let's see if I can hear you. Go on, Mary.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, this is brilliant, right.
Do you know what, Mary? I actually put my question in the Q&A.
Yeah, I know, I saw that, but I'd like to hear your voice.
All right. I mean, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the speakers and the panel. It's been a really interesting, their contributions have been very varied and very different, but very interesting. I'd just like to take up the point that Helen made, that women need to be more active in their trade unions. And I was wondering whether the other panelists feel the same, and why is it they feel that the women are not more active in their trade unions?
Do you want to take that now before I ask? Or let me take one more.
Okay.
Christina De Silva. Mary, I'm going to shut you up now. Christina,
is it working?
Yeah, go on.
Oh,
yeah,
hi there. I just wanted to thank all the speakers. I absolutely loved hearing it all. I've written some notes down. We're from a Channel Island, so me and my partner are trying to set up he has a union here, but in my workplace I'm trying to get more women. I just don't know how to get women to join more because some of them are scared. But like you were saying, Sarah, I completely agree with you. I was a sports coach and I would give up my time constantly, not for the money, but to coach kids sports out of literally the love of it. But I was earning £8.30 an hour back in those days, and now there's sometimes where I just volunteer for it because I want them to have a better future, whereas when we're all struggling and like you don't really want to lay it on the kids. But it was really inspiring hearing what you guys were saying, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing for the female workers.
That's great, Christina. Thank you so much. I'm going to take one more. Lorraine. Lorraine? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. I also wanted to congratulate all three speakers. Absolutely fantastic and really inspiring. Just wanted to report today, I've been part of the campaign being run to get reach out to people working in Starbucks, the baristas campaign being run by Unite and the Union of Shop Distributive and Allied Workers. Managed to get into I think 4 coffee shops altogether, 3 Starbucks, 1 Costa, very well received by people there. And it is the old-fashioned way of organising really, which is to get the organisers to go to the factory gate. And to some degree, if you've got somebody who wants to join a union, coming back to the last point, or you've got people who want to join the union, I think the first step is contact your local office, your local or regional office, and just say, can we get somebody down here to talk to people or get things up and running? But it really is critical as well, I think, that the unions themselves actually realise that the old ways sometimes are the best ways. Getting out, talk to people face to face, that's how to get people into unions, and from there taking it further. And I know that's the model certainly that Helen, I know, has used to great effect over many years.
Thanks, Lorraine. Right, so back to the panel. You might want to make some comments on, I'm going to take another group a bit later. So over to you, Sarah, Helen.
I'm happy to come in on some of those. Yeah. So one of the attendees mentioned about the unions, it being difficult to get women more active. So I'd say there are still significant barriers, and we have to be really clear about that. And unions are still very much dominated by men. I mean, more women are coming through now. So I think the more women, particularly the young women like Bella and Sarah, come through, other women will look to them and they'll say, you know what, I want to be like her, you know, and that opens the door for more women to feel confident enough to step up and to come in. There is, like I said already, the training structures. The training structures are not suited to the lower paid workers, people with caring responsibilities, people with difficult shifts as well, shift patterns. So I find it's very, very important to get into the workplaces and go to where the workers are and try and break things down. So I've done that myself, delivered bite-sized bits of training on people's lunch breaks. So I think, as the unions, have to be more flexible and be able to reach in a bit more into the workplaces. Another person mentioned about workers being scared. Absolutely, we come across that all the time in GMB. I think bullying and harassment, the unions must really take that extremely seriously when that happens, and we need to pull all the stops out to make sure that our reps know that they're absolutely, the whole weight of the union's got to be put behind them if they experience bullying and harassment. When we took the Mighty strike action, the 10 days, Mighty went after 3 of our reps. They handed them investigation meeting letters after the last day of strike action. So it took hours of our time to defend those reps. We defended all of them. They're all now back in work. And Lorraine, just well done for the Barista campaign. I think that's fantastic. There's so many unorganized workplaces out there. So we really need initiatives like this, gate jobs, people getting in there, talking to low paid workers, securing the rep, and just moving forward to organize those workplaces. So that's amazing. So that's what I've got to say.
Thanks, Helen. Sarah, do you want to say anything about anything? You're muted.
Yeah, I just managed to double click, which is clever of me. Yeah, just again, coming back to sort of factors that might lead to women not being as vocal. Just speaking from my workplace. I know I mentioned when I was talking that I didn't want to draw too much into like commonly purported arguments about women in management. However, having that management model being overwhelmingly male in workplaces, I do think that it does very much embolden that hierarchy. And I think the disparity of that is that the majority of support staff and part-time staff are even more overwhelmingly female than male. And therefore, you're going to be looking at sort of more intricate issues that maybe aren't addressed as importantly, or they're not prioritised as much by the unions. So things like needing to go part-time because of maternity, or being on a part-time contract, or your directed hours only being half of what a regular teacher's is. I feel like the issues raised by the sort of members of staff that are primarily women might not be as heard. And I do think having more female reps in school does, not to go too much into identity politics or whatever, but I do think issues like maternity or issues like sexism, I found anyway that sort of female members are more inclined to discuss that with me than they would be even their line manager. I've noticed that. Or even just what I found very effective is sort of just having those, again, like Lorraine has said, like Elodie said, these sort of old-fashioned ways of organising, having those one-to-one conversations and then getting a meeting on that, so we can actually get a sense of, is this a widely felt issue? Is this a deeply felt issue that our female members are experiencing? And even just the recognition that it is something that is being widely felt is enough to galvanise women in these spaces quite a lot. So yeah, I found that particularly effective. Have I got anything else written there? Yeah, that's what I've got to say on those 2 points.
Ella?
Thank you, Mary. Lorraine, you're absolutely spot on with that. Face to face, it is how you build up any campaign, confidence and growth in what your fight's about. The cleaners campaign was thought to be impossible. We got 40 different nationalities on just one of our contracts, and we've taken out 5. But I remember one day, because I live in Hastings down in East Sussex, travelling up to Victoria to go and speak to all the female cleaners, because they mainly work on the PM shift. I'm guessing it's due to childcare. But they all work on the evening shift. I remember them shouting at me for at least 2 hours. Then they was crying for another couple hours. By the end of that, we're all best friends. I speak to them on a regular basis now. Love going through Victoria to visit them and all the other locations. So it really is about getting down on the shop floor and speaking to them in front of management as well. I've had managers who've underpaid staff the day before I've turned up. Then they've approached me when I'm speaking to a member of staff, tried to shake my hand. Obviously, that didn't go down very well. So it's just showing them that you have the confidence to be like that. I'm in the same position as them. I do the same job as them. They can have exactly the same confidence as me. We've got a good fight on our hands and we're ready for it. So 100%, Lorraine, that's brilliant. And also well done for the work you're doing with Starbucks and the baristas.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, there's 2 people who put questions in the Q&A or whatever it's called, Andy and Elle, and I wonder if you would like to say your questions rather than me reading them out. And I know Christiane has also got her hand up, so I'll go to Christiane first, and then Andy and Elle's one. If you want to speak, please speak. But I'm going to call Christiane Osan first. Where are you, Christiane? Oh, here, right. Christiane?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thanks to the panel. I think it's brilliant to hear the amazing work that you've been doing, but it's also a bit depressing to hear in 2022 the issues that you come up against when it comes to women being, organizing collectively in their trade union or trying to organize, because these are things that we encountered many decades ago. And it just shows that we need to remain vigilant and that we mustn't be complacent, and that meetings such as these are extremely important to provide the kind of confidence support and solidarity to workers and women workers to carry on with the work, the campaigning and the fight against the attacks on their working rights, on their lives, and the general situation that we see these days with the austerity that we're facing. You know, when you look back at, for example, Dagenham, where the machinists were organizing and campaigning for parity with the male workers, the lack of support from their union. In the end, it was a official who was very supportive. But that's what's happening today, and what we've heard is not far off what was happening then. And I think that whilst maybe some of us are no longer in work, no longer active in the workplace, I think that what we can do is to find and support and join picket lines and see how we can help. It is, I think, the thing that we can do to give support, encouragement to the women that are facing such difficulties organizing for strikes. We hear about, Mary, you mentioned the number of strikes, the number of strike days, the number of workers on strike. But within that, it's you know, we talk about the Unite workers, the dockers, the railways, but within that, it's really a kind of male picture that we get, and we don't see all the terrific work that the women, low-paid, part-time, isolated workers are doing. And I think one of the things we can do, and tonight has brought it back right up on the agenda, what we can do to support, encourage, and give solidarity to those in the struggle. And there will be more, especially in the health service, as unions are balloting, and some RCN has already got their result. But that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Christiane. Thank you. Andy Bain, you've got your hand up, and please speak. Can you speak, Andy?
Oh, hopefully, yes.
Yeah.
I'll just read the question. I think it was in response to Christina earlier. So I've said, as a step towards asking and getting women to join the union, might it be useful to quietly collect views on the key concerns people have, find a way to challenge management on the most winnable issue, win it, and then ask people to join for more and bigger victories in the future? And I asked the question because I think it was the Bakers Union in some of their work maybe 2 or 3 years ago with McDonald's and 1 or 2 other sort of fast food companies. That was their approach, rather than asking people to join straight away, to get a small victory under their belt and then ask people to join.
Okay, before I ask the panel to come back, there's Elle Zwandal. Please speak.
Hello, Mary. Hello, everybody. Thanks, everybody, and particularly Sarah, Bella and Helen for your contributions. They were brilliant. My question, well, it was just a point really that I raised in the question, which was, Helen made this very valid point, which was the trade union movement in itself needs to feminize its structures in order for women to feel safe and comfortable and confident in participating in the real class struggle. Because even as Christiane said, you know, we are, it's 2022 and we are still debating the same issues as we were in the 80s. I was a nurse in the 80s, and we took part in industrial action then, very limited. I'm now in the NEU as a teacher, and as Sarah said, it's predominantly women and the support staff. But until we actually confront the structures that impede women in feeling comfortable enough to participate actively in the trade union movement, I don't think we're going to ever eradicate this point about us feeling confident. And I think that I know that Mary in the past has mentioned something like perhaps we need to actually be more active in building a 2022 women's liberation organisation into part of this class struggle, because, as Mary said quite rightly, until the structures that are mainly held by men actually realise that they won't win without us women, I don't think we're going to get anywhere.
Thanks
Sorry
so
to be so depressing.
No, thank you very much. And over to the panel now for their thoughts on what you just heard. Who wants to start? Helen.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Yeah, so a couple of people have said they find things depressing, and I think the first contributor said that things are still hard for women, and you know, she's absolutely right. I suppose I don't feel depressed. I suppose I feel hopeful, because I think that we're in a period now where a lot of people are going to have no choice. Like Bella made this point herself, they'll have no choice but to step up. Women will have no choice but to step up into the struggle. And what I've observed from disputes I've been involved in is that struggles throw up very, very good leaders. And I think many of the workplace leaders who are going to come up in the future are going to be women. And then it's our job as trade unions to kind of grab onto them, develop them further. And in my own union, GMB, during the NHS Pay 15 campaign during the pandemic, a lot of nurses went on the march because they were very angry about the way they were being treated. Many of those nurses came into my own union, and they're some of the best reps we've got now right across the country, those women in the GMB organizing in their hospitals. So there is hope there, even though there's also a very difficult picture there, and things are regressing for women in many areas as well. Andy, I think, came in and said about getting wins. Wins are so important to build confidence, even little wins. He's absolutely correct on that. I mean, I find a good way, you know, if you're going kind of to do a gate job or going into a workplace for the first time, talking to lots of people is so important. Having those little 2-minute conversations just to kind of get a feel of what the issues are. A survey sometimes can be a really good way as well to engage people in a workplace. Top 5 issues, you know, and rate them 1 to 5. It doesn't have to be complicated, and that gets you talking, gets you some intelligence, get you some information, and then from there you can very quickly kind of identify those kind of subjects that are widely felt and deeply felt that people want to kind of battle on. And it's absolutely correct, you know, we have to identify the issues that are widely felt and deeply felt, and then that's your campaign. And yeah, that's right, don't recruit people straight away, wait, get embedded in, and then do a mass sign up and go for it when you know that the mood and the momentum is there. That's certainly the way I do it. And I think the last contributor there said about the trade union movement. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, when I started out in the trade union movement in a different trade union, not GMB, I had to kick a lot of doors down because when I led that campaign, the backlash from that didn't come from the employer, actually, it came from my own trade union. And I was actually investigated for leading that campaign. I was subjected to a formal investigation. And what followed that was years and years of bullying by predominantly male branch leaders and the region, actually. So I would hope, I mean, I'd like to work towards making sure that no other woman trade union activist goes through, you know, when I went through myself, because we shouldn't have to go through that, you know. And I think if we can set up, you know, support networks for women, trade union women, and help each other and advise each other, because some of us have a lot of experience navigating the unions. I think we should go for it and do that. I think it'll be really, really important.
Sarah, Bella, you want to say something?
Yeah, definitely. Andy, again, you're right as well. Even the most smallest win, I think we spoke about this at our Young Members Conference this year, RMT Young Members Conference. Someone said about getting milk for the mess room. So doing obviously the flip reverse of Maggie Thatcher and actually getting the workers the milk for the mess room can be seen as a small win, and it does actually speak volumes. Also, again, time spent, as Lorraine said earlier, face to face, time spent. You don't have to necessarily do site visits to recruit members. I actually enjoy going around just speaking to people, finding out about their backgrounds and their struggles in life and in the workplace as well, and see if there's any way you can help them in both senses. Collective approach as well. Don't just go with one of you all the time. because at one of the sites we've got like 40 cleaners, and if it's just you and there's been loads going on and no one's been there for ages, you're not going to be able to answer 40 different questions at the same time. So take a collective with you. We've actually got majority female reps now on the Churchill cleaners contracts. We've got 4 females, 2 males, and they are my support network. They're absolutely brilliant. If I need time off, I know that they can do the job. They're very well organised, and they love to boss the males around, actually. It's really funny to watch. So yeah, no, I think Helen's right. Through the struggle, we're going to throw up a lot of good leaders, and I'm hopeful that a lot of those leaders will be female.
Thanks, Bella. Sarah?
Yeah, just sort of going to tie in with sort of what everyone else has said, but I found, particularly with teaching, I think since sort of, obviously unions have come to the fore in full force in recent years, which is fantastic, but it seems to have been, particularly like 10 or so years ago, it sort of was seen as more of a service more than anything else. So what tends to be the case in my school is that we've got a lot of older members who have been there for like 20 odd years or so, who are the most militant comrades you can find, and they want to strike if they lose their pen. It's fantastic. But then you've got these younger ECTs who are slightly disillusioned with it. They don't know why they want to join the union, particularly young women. So what I've found really works again is those one-to-one conversations and actually getting a small win, even on an individual basis, because what that does is it shows the union does work. It has worked for me and it has helped me. Even just having a conversation, having a meeting with management about something, objectively minimal but massive to that individual member, like having to do like an extra lesson and having to contest that, or just going to a maternity meeting with someone. I went to a maternity meeting with a member, and she managed to get her timetable reduced, which is what she was asking for. Apparently the tone completely switched when I was in the room because they knew there was a rep there, and that really galvanized her. And what I always find really good is having those one-to-one conversations. You can tell, I always think someone that's really angry and really impassioned is always a good person to try and bring into some sort of committee. So we've now got, because we've got quite a large membership and it's growing, we've now got about 2 or 3 different committees. And what you can do in terms of particularly pulling women into the union membership in your school, if you're having issues with that, you just pinpoint, having those one-to-one conversations and pinpointing what they are angry about, then actually asking them, do you want to be on a committee for this? Do you want to come to a meeting for that? And yeah, that's just a really great way of mobilizing women, because they've seen what you can do because you've done something for them on an individual basis, and then to follow up from that to actually, because obviously it's very different being having the option to join a committee and actually having someone say to you, okay, you're angry about this, I think you'd be fantastic in this, do you want to come on board? Yeah, so that's what I've found to be really effective in sort of like building up a stronger female presence in my workspace.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. If anybody wants to, please put your hand up, but I wondered if you'd like to ask each other questions or share experiences amongst you 4. Whilst we're waiting, if anybody else wants to raise their hand, please do, and I'll call you. But let's just hear if you want to exchange anything between you as panelists.
Yes, I've got some questions for the other panelists, if that's okay, Mary. First of all, to Sarah, I was really interested in hearing about your experiences in the schools, and particularly when you said about, because we get this in the NHS, we get this idea put forward that, okay, look, striking is really, really dangerous for patients. You can't do it. Fighting for your rights is going to hurt the patients. So we get this idea put forward to us. And I think from what you said that you get something similar around the kids. Okay, if you fight for your rights, you're going to hurt the kids. And I just wondered how you tackle that, as a rep, how you tackle that idea, and what sort of things that you sort of might say to encourage people to step up into union activity or to become involved in a campaign.
Yeah, good point, isn't it? But Sarah.
Well, I always ask people, how many hours are you actually working at the moment? Because you're not supposed to be going above 1265, and I've worked out a couple, even mine is like 1300. So I'm like, look, what are you actually doing? The workload for teachers is never gonna, it's always going to be heavy. Nobody just goes into the job for the holidays, for the pensions. If we were doing that, then we wouldn't be in the job. There is not one teacher that doesn't already care about the kids. And what I sort of have to ask them is, first of all, like, okay, what is your classroom like? What resources are you missing? And how is that actually impacting the kids? Because actually what happens when resources are underfunded, we are technically resources for the school. So if you've got a decreasing number of staff who don't want to stay on board because they can't afford to, then you're looking at dangerous staffing levels, and you're actually looking at kids who don't have consistency because they can't have the same teacher and they've always got cover. If you don't have resources for buildings, last year we had hell with like live wires, we had rats in some buildings, we had buildings that were under sort of like the legal requirement for temperature. So I'm like, this is what is impacting the kids. They're not in a safe environment. They're not getting the learning that they need. They are safer at home at this point. So I always encourage them to look at it long term. How are these kids actually getting the education that they deserve? And are you going to stay in this profession, ideally speaking? You know, I'm probably taking away as much as I did working in Manchester, living with my sister, and I was working hospitality as I am as a teacher, which is, you know, an ostensibly historically like white collar middle earner job. So, you know, and I just have to ask them, the only reason why, you know, we had rights to begin with was because teachers before us fought for them. Would you recommend this profession to a pupil that you're teaching? Did you have a teacher that inspired you? Where are those teachers going to be? So I just sort of like draw them into what's the actual effect on the kids' learning for resources, not just teachers' pay, and what are we going to do how is this going to affect the kids' future if we're not doing something to secure that their rights and their terms of pay are secured?
And how do you answer that, Helen?
Well, yeah, I mean, Sarah's absolutely correct. You know, you have to always link the struggle with the service that's provided, in our case, with the service that's provided to the public. And it's so important that you just outline the impact of like low pay and staffing shortages and all of those things, because then it clicks in the minds of the public. And then you have to, it's so important to get them thinking, yes, this is why I need to support this strike, because it's actually about my service, my child's teaching, my NHS. It's so important to make those links the entire time, really, and just to raise consciousness, because the employers and the government will be very, very quick, obviously, to turn around and say we're selfish, we're damaging things. But in fact, the cuts and austerity, you know, that we've seen that are going to get worse through this autumn statement, the privatization, that's actually what's doing the real damage. And it's so important that we point that out the whole time, and the importance of fighting back and trying to push back against cuts and privatization, because it's happening absolutely everywhere. And the impact of it's devastating, not just for the workforce, but for the people receiving the services as well, actually. Because privatization particularly, you know, and I'm sure Bella can come in on this, leads to worse services, leads to less services. And I think it's so important we make those links the entire time. But I had a question for Bella as well, if that's okay. Am I being really cheeky?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So Bella, you know, I was really fascinated when you were talking about like overtime on your contract, and I wondered if all of you were forced, because of the low pay, to top up your salaries with overtime. And I wondered how that's how management use that, and do they leverage that sometimes to stop people speaking out? Because I've come across this in the NHS, and I just wanted your thoughts on that and how that works in your sector.
He's a great,
100%.
Brian Clough, who was a famous football manager.
Andy, I'm going to shut you up. Hang on.
Oh, I'm still on.
Yeah. You're shut up now. Go on, Bella. Sorry.
Yeah, no, Helen, 100%. As you well know, in outsourcing, the rat race to the bottom. Every 5 years or so, these contracts go up for tender, and the person who wins the bid is the lowest bidder, because obviously they show cost savings on the contract. But how do you possibly show cost savings if you've been given a model for a contract of cleaning for, say, 20 cleaners? And in 5 years' time, you want to show cost savings, what you're going to do, you're going to cut the cleaning levels, the staffing levels, which obviously creates overtime, permanent overtime. So through underpayment of wages, that obviously keeps people doing overtime all the time just to catch up. Through pay slips that are harder to decrypt than a Da Vinci Code, that also keeps people doing overtime. But then when industrial action comes around, I see overtime being used as a tool to try and get people to strike break. I've heard of many managers saying to staff, if you take strike action, you will not get overtime. You're contracted to 5 days a week, not 6. We will take that away from you. So it's actually used as a weapon. Through underpayment of wages, again, obviously you've got people going to payday loans, so they know the next month they need to make more to pay off that payday loan, because obviously interest rates must be absolutely through the roof at the moment. It's just an endless debt cycle in outsourcing, and it only gets worse. I mean, my contract goes up for tender in March, and I said on an interview recently, we're ending up in a setup where you're going to have one train cleaner down in Hastings and probably one up in the likes of Euston or somewhere in the London area, because it's just getting that bad. And we know how dangerous it is. Also, we are safety critical workers like the most of the rest of the railway. So there's certain training that's meant to go into us working on the railway. That's becoming less and less through every different outsourced contract that we get in. It's so dangerous. It's not going to improve unless we're brought back in-house. It's as simple as that. Outsourcing has absolutely no place in any sector, not just the railway. It's a disgusting model. It doesn't work. It does not bring profit to the people who actually own the sector. It just puts money in fat cats' profits who actually have nothing to do with the railway. It's pointless. So thank you for that question.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question about outsourcing. How is it, are there strategies that can work to get outsourced contracts back in-house? And if so, have you, I'm sure Helen has got some examples, but I'd like to hear about this, and I think other people would as well, because it is the real, that, and there's just this, anyway, over to you, Helen.
Yeah, I mean, I have not yet successfully managed to get a contract back in-house. One of the things I've been trying to do is trying to push to drive up the pay terms and conditions, because that alone would make it kind of too costly and too expensive anyway. And you find when things get too costly that outsourced companies aren't interested anyway. Currently, we're trying to get the G4S workers in Croydon University Hospital back in-house. So we started that campaign, and the time to do it, I think, is when the contract comes up for tender, because that's when it's at its most vulnerable. So timing's very important. So G4S, the contract's now out for tender, so there'll be lots of bidders. So now is the time to start raising a struggle there again, because and put that in the public domain, which is exactly what we're going to be doing. Like I said, we've got the march on the 10th of December outside Croydon University Hospital, the march against outsourcing. So we want to kind of put it in the public domain. These workers, they've already petitioned the trust saying they want to go back in-house. The trust predictably has ignored them, like it generally does, like it did before when they demanded the improvement in pay. So the only way we could win that last dispute was using their industrial muscle and balloting them for strike action, and then the trust and G4S back down and give them everything on the ballot paper. So we're about to engage in that battle for real in Croydon University Hospital. So watch this space. We'll do everything it takes, because the workers have decided that's what they wanted. They know they're being treated worse by G4S than they would be if they went back into the NHS, even in terms of just the welfare, the staff welfare facilities that are available within the NHS that aren't available with the outsourced companies. Just shocking. Everything's just run really badly. In the NHS, when I worked in the NHS for 28 years, my pay was never wrong. My pay was always correct. Private companies that constantly shorten the pay and in fact deliberately shaving off you know, a fiver here, a tenner there. And like Bella quite rightly said, the pay slips, they're just impossible to decode. I've seen many of them, and they're putting in, if they do give a pay rise, they don't even tell the workers what it is. So they can't even work out what they're getting. And it's all deliberate to confuse, so they can basically rip them off, you know, and we get constant and continuous pay problems, particularly also the bullying and the harassment, and this kind of constant demand for the workers to do more and more for less and less and less and less. That's not the case yet in the NHS or in the host employers, but it's getting that way. You know, what we're finding is some of the host employers are actually adopting some of these methods now as well. So we do need to push back hard. But yeah, watch this space with Croydon G4S. We're engaged.
Would you like to repeat the date?
Yeah, the 10th of December. So we're inviting absolutely everybody to march with the G4S workers, assembling outside Croydon University Hospital, 10:30, marching on the high street. It'll be really busy. It'll be Christmas. They'll be leafleting the public about what's going on in their hospital, and just really making that point that outsourcing is just absolutely terrible for the public as well as the workforce. I think it's really important.
Yes, and it makes you also realise that actually outsourcing is much more common than we like to imagine. We talk about the public sector, and actually so much of the public sector is not in public hands at all. And that includes lots of parts of the education system. I mean, you know, Academy Trust, it's privatised. The privatisation is just there, well, it's just rampant. And now, is there anybody in the audience who would like to ask a question or make a comment? Please raise your hand, because we would love to hear from you, but don't feel obliged. No, I think silence is the order of the day. Sarah, did you want to say anything about outsourcing and privatisation? How to fight academies? That's the big outsourcing.
Yeah, I was sort of making that link as Helen was speaking there. Yeah, that's, to be honest, that's sort of the root cause of a lot of the current issues. It's effectively, it's a continuation of Thatcher's grant maintained schools, was Tony Blair's brainchild of academies. Basically, all it is it's a two-tier management model where you've got a trust. It's a charitable organisation who invest in failing schools, in the same sense that the NHS is a very generalised sort of overview of it. You know, it's a public service, but the issues that people don't see are those sort of more insidious, gradual outsourcing. That's exactly what academies are. So you're talking about investors who are more interested in profit margins than actually improving the schools, because most of them have never been in a classroom, or if they have, it was like 15 years or so ago, and their incentive just isn't the same, and they're the furthest removed from the classrooms. So you get in CEOs of schools, which is just bizarre, making like 200k a year. Meanwhile, teachers that are actually doing the job day in, day out haven't had a pay rise since 2006. And if you actually look at the statistics of results, because academies are all about league tables, they're all about results. That's what gets them, largely what gets them the money in. If you actually look at the results for local authorities compared to academies, it's slightly higher for academies, but definitely not enough to justify it. So it just goes to show again that it doesn't actually, you know, increased privatisation doesn't increase standards at all. It doesn't increase outcomes at all. So yeah, the NEU has a huge campaign on stopping academisation. There was a fantastic campaign a couple of years back from an academy near me. They lost that, unfortunately, but I know there's a lot of schools in recent years that have either become academies or have had to like fight tooth and nail to not have academisation, because you marketise anything, it becomes a market. And that's exactly what we're seeing in schools. And it takes autonomy away from teachers, because we're not respected as professionals. We're just data. That's all it is. We're just there to turn up, get results. And the kids feel that as well, because they've effectively become exam factories, even more so than they ever have been. So yeah, it's exact same situation, but different sector.
Now, just there are no more questions, but I would like you to see what you think about this. We've got a situation now where there are certainly over 1 million workers involved in different sectors of industry, different sectors of the economy, service industry, and so on. What's your view of, or have you got a view? Is it possible, do you think, to get some coordinated action? We could call it possibly a general strike, whatever. How do you feel we can maximise the impact of all the individual struggles? Now, I do know, for example, Helen, that of the last time there was a MITI strike, you had RMT, Mick Lynch and the RMT came on your picket line, which is a lovely thing to do. What about coordinating all the struggles? Do you think that a generalised day of, maybe not even a day, but I hesitate to use the word general strike, but that's what I really mean. Do you think that would be a good thing to do? Is it possible? What's your view?
Me and Helen have actually spoken about this before.
Oh,
after the We Demand Better rally. I remember we were speaking about this. Definitely can be done, 100%. As we've all just come to the conclusion of, whether it's outsourcing in the schools, whether it's outsourcing in the NHS, whether it's outsourcing in the rail sector, the bin workers, whatever, we've all got the same fight on our hands. So 100% collectively, that's the best approach, with kicking it off every single sector and outsourcing, massive campaigns, massive rallies, collective action.
Yeah, I think it's starting to happen already. I mean, you can see it's slowly happening already. And definitely, I'm sure that there's union leaders who are certainly in informal discussions about coordinating things. I know from my side, the mighty reps in St. George's Hospital have said to me already that when the RCN call their strike days, they want to be outstanding with them. So I think there is a kind of a raised consciousness. I think workers will demand it anyway. And I've certainly had my workers in the health service say to me, look at what the postmen are doing, look at what the rail workers are doing, you know, we need to do that too, you know. So more and more people are kind of putting their sights to that. I mean, I'd also like to make the point that it's so important as well that the social movements and the community campaign groups that are out there link up with the union disputes as well. And we've certainly benefited from that in the protests and with the strike action with the mighty workers. So, and it's so, it just gives the workers such a morale boost actually when they see people from other trade unions and community campaigns and local people just turning up to the picket lines and standing with them in solidarity. And it kind of reinforces the feeling we're right to do this, because they get so much pressure from management and so much bullying. It's just really, it just reinforces them a lot, you know, when they get that outside support. So I think, Mary, there's a need for coordination right across the piece, you know, and also then we need to be thinking about those broader demands that we can make for everybody that will unite everybody and galvanize people that they can get behind and just build a mass pressure really on this Tory government, because what's coming down the line is just going to be absolutely devastating for wages, terms and conditions, our public services, our NHS. What's coming down the line is brutal. So we do need to all link up. The bosses all talk to each other. I bet you right now, you know, the rail company bosses are talking to the NHS bosses. They all talk to each other. They all learn from every single dispute. We need to do the same in our movement. We need to network, speak to each other, get involved in each other's disputes. Absolutely up to that 100%.
There's two people who want to speak. So I'm going to ask, so Christina first. Christina?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I completely agree with both. I think as well, if we are doing something about it, we are also giving those who don't have a voice or don't have the courage to stand up, we are sort of supporting them as well. So I absolutely agree. I recently went to Harry Pollitt School in Manchester for the weekend, and it was very interesting how many ladies and other women that turned up And one of the things we did was women's liberation, and how they were planning on doing things next year that will hope to encourage like women and also males, and like getting them to believe that there is a future and there is hope, especially for the next generation. You want to like create a life where they're able to live, be happy. And at this rate, we have no future. And I think it's really important to fight and like stand up for those who can't talk themselves.
Thanks.
That's what I had to
Christine.
say.
Lovely, thank you very much. Mary Adesides got her hand up. Mary?
Yeah, I wanted to come in on the question of developing community campaigns. I think that is very, very important. We had a big rally in Brent, where I live, from Enough is Enough, and Brent Trades Council, which I chair, is planning a convoy either next Friday or soon, because the CWU, the RMT and London Underground are all out at the same time. And what we were thinking of doing is having a convoy going from picket in Kilburn, which is the south of the borough, then going up to an RMT picket a bit further up, then going to another Royal Mail picket, and just crossing the borough and going from picket to picket with loud hailers and making a lot of noise, calling on the general public to support the strikers and the pickets, and the fight that you are all leading against the cost of living crisis, and broadening out our campaign. So that's one thing we're doing, because up to now, what we've been doing is going on the pickets. We've been sort of dividing ourselves up, and some of us have done one picket and others have done another. But what we wanted to do now is to actually link all the pickets and show that basically we are all fighting the same thing, which is the cost of living crisis.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
Do you want to comment at all on that? And a quick round, and then we'll wind it up so that people can make a cup of tea, have something to eat, and relax.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's important. You know, there's many people who are worried, who don't have a voice, but there is real hope. And I think the more people that step up and come forward in the unions and in the communities and lead things, then other people will look to that and will step up as well. It'll give other people confidence. So I think even though we're in a period where the working class is under fierce attack, there's so many opportunities as well to develop new leaders, bring new people through, and just really, I think this time, once we start getting organized, we start building those links, we don't let go of it ever again. We keep it, and we keep our links and keep our networks with each other. And I think it's only going to build in the next period. We've got the RCN now coming out soon as well. We've got the PCS union, they've just won their ballot. So a lot of unions and a lot of workers are going to come into struggle. And I think we're going to find there's some really, really good people out there that we have yet to discover. So we're in a period where the struggle is going to intensify, and we need to be up to the task to lead it, I think.
Sarah, any final comments? You're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I was just being slow. Yeah, I suppose with any sort of strike action in a school, it's interesting what you say about getting community involvement, because schools are such pillars of communities. You always want to get parents on side. So it's quite a useful sort of place to build up skills in, sort of getting, you know, the wider community involved. But I think particularly in current conditions, it's very useful, because I don't think anyone can really avoid just how interconnected these industries are. Like, for example, if there's a teacher strike, then parents can't go to work. If there's a CWU strike, then schools aren't going to get the post. If there's an RMT strike, teachers can't get to work. So as long as you've got those, you know, those powerful networks on the ground where we understand and we're actually fighting for those same rights, it's unavoidable at the moment that we are going to, you know, be in contact with each other. And, you know, let's not separate workers from the wider community, because workers are in the wider community. We're all, you know, the vast majority of us are connected. So I think there is ample opportunity there. And I've definitely sat down with because the trust has two different schools, but with the union rep at that trust and sort of discuss, right, what opportunity is actually here to get parents involved, because we've got parents who work for the RMC, we've got parents who work for the CWU. So it's, yeah, there's definitely like ample opportunity there that we really need to take, I think.
Bella.
If there's one thing that's really, really clear, we have massive public support throughout every single sector in the trade union movement now. We've got the younger generation standing next to the older generations. We've got workers of different nationalities standing on picket lines together. We've all woken up, and people that wouldn't necessarily fight back before are fighting back now. We've got a lot more in common together than what we would have divided. We need to keep pushing the fight, like Helen said. Even when we win, keep on fighting. Don't ever let it go, because we've created something that's truly amazing. Before, trade unionism was like a dirty little secret, but now it's something that's actually begins to be a bit cool, because it's even on television and all sorts of things. So keep fighting back, keep pushing, and once you win, don't let it go.
Well, fantastic. Yes, well, you're not a dirty little secret, any of you, and I think you've been brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I think this meeting's been fantastic as well, and so I'm really, well, I wish we could all, I think you could all, no, you can't, we can't see you all clapping, but I know you would if you could. So virtually we are clapping, but so thank you very, very much indeed. I think we've all learned a lot, and the one thing that comes through this is, I think, the need for working class unity. And that means understanding that the working class does consist of women as well. And I'll repeat what I said before, and that is that that such unity without women is not possible. And your fight is our fight. It's all our fight. And I make no apology for saying that this meeting has been called by the Communist Party, because it's in our DNA that we want to promote unity. It's not a sectarian organisation. We understand class. We understand that to win unity, you have to also recognise differences, and that those differences, which are traditionally have been besetting us on the grounds of race and gender, are ones that have to be overcome. And we also understand that it's absolutely the case that your struggle is proving absolutely that the old adage that wage increases do not cause inflation. Inflation has now gone up is now over 11%, and it will go up more. It's 12% now. Marx argued this a long, long time ago, in 1867, where he refuted the notion that wage rises cause inflation. You haven't had wage rises, and yet we've got 11% inflation. So the question of trade union strength is absolutely vital. You are at the forefront of the class struggle at the moment, and there is such a thing as a class struggle. I think it was Helen who mentioned that the ruling class are very united. I mean, they are actually a little bit divided, as we saw over the trust situation, but nevertheless, they'll pull together around this mythical notion of the market. This mythical notion of the market, which is holding the country to ransom. We're always called the trade unionists holding the country to ransom, and we know that's not true. And I think what this discussion has also shown is that there's got to be a link, and there must be a link between the struggle at the point of production, the struggle at the point of consumption. In other words, the community struggle and the struggle that you're involved in the workplace. They go together. But in closing this meeting, I think you give us a lot of hope. There's 3 young women here who are at the forefront of their own particular struggle, and I think we've all agreed that what we need is a unified struggle which really can make major inroads into the power of capital, because that's the issue that's holding us back. The mythical market is the capitalist market of people who are making huge profits, as you yourself have indicated, through the outsourcing, privatization, and so on. And of course, the hedge funds. This is the mythical market which they're also concerned about. but we're concerned about ourselves. And I think your message to all of us has been a very much one of hope. And Bella has pointed out time and again that we haven't got any option but to struggle. And through that struggle, more and more people will come into it, and they are already. So I thank you very much indeed. Urge you all to ensure that we read the Morning Star. Helen writes for it a lot. But it is the only paper. I'm not making a big sectarian push here. It is the only socialist daily paper in the English language. It's the only one that reports our struggles. So with that, I just thank you much. Not thank you to the panelists, but thank you also to our lovely. Well, I can't call you an audience really, but our participants. And thank you for your questions. And I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. Thanks very much, everybody. And dare to struggle, dare to win. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.